Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We're here with a awesome new interview. It's funny because the last episode, I guess you could call it, we did on Sunday was with Mr. Palm, Mr. Henrik Palm, who has won Grammy. Now we're here with Mr. David Bottrill. Is it Bottrill or
Bottrill, that's right. You had it
Bottrill?
exactly right.
Sweet. Mr. David Bottrill, who is maybe one of the most legendary just audio personnel, producer, mixer, whatever of all time. Working with the most incredible albums, most incredible bands, most incredible projects, 3 Grammys. An absolute honor to have him on the show. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very pleased to be here, and thank you for such a gracious opening.
Thank you for accepting the request. Usually the forms that you do, like on websites, there'll be forms to contact bands, right? So whenever those I do those, they never work. You never get a response. So it's always a dead end. And I was really surprised when Mrs. Nicole contacted me and she was like, we can make this work. So thank you, Miss Nicole. I really do appreciate it. And thank you for being on.
Hey, it's my pleasure.
The first thing I want to talk about is I heard you've been working on some new stuff. Are you willing to tell us or?
I'm working right now with well, a number of artists. I'm usually working on a few projects at the same time. One of which is an artist called Delanila. We just got back from Iceland, and we did
Ooh,
some tracking there with some fantastic musicians in a great studio just outside of Reykjavik. And we had a great time there. Iceland is a fascinating place. I've never been there before, and I was sort of I'd been led to believe that it was quite expensive, and that was confirmed. But it was also from a nature standpoint and a topographical standpoint, one of the most fascinating places I've ever seen. The volcanic land, the constant open volcanoes that were flowing lava around, the hot springs, that sort of thing. Pretty fantastic. And then I'm also doing a little bit of writing and working with a band that I've done a record with before here in Canada. They're called Crown Lands, and they're a duo, drummer, singer, and guitar player, keyboard player, everything else. So we're writing some more. Um, they're quite a progressive band, but we're doing both progressive and more commercial accessible material as well.
awesome. Yeah. I had a friend and a teacher of mine go to Iceland, I think a year back, and all the pictures they put up on screens and everything looked incredible. That's definitely a bucket list place. And it's very nice to hear that you're working on so many projects. More music is always great. So in this point in time, you've worked with some of the most legendary artists of our time. Um, older artists, younger artists, everyone in between. 10 years back, did you think that you were going to be where you are now? Are you ahead of where you thought you were going to be? Are you a little bit behind?
Um, well, I think 10 years back is maybe a little bit too short. I've been doing this for almost 40.
Mhm.
So I think at the very beginning of my career, I had aspirations, but they were really only in making music and being able to have an occupation that doing something that I loved. I didn't know that it was going to end up being working with some of my heroes and working with some of the most talented people that are writing music, both through the 80s, 90s, and today. So I didn't really consider where I was going. I was at the time just grateful to be able to be working in an area that I had a passion for.
It's awesome. It's so like your journey is super inspirational because it kind of shows the rest of us that it's possible. It can happen. You can do it, you know? I don't know. It's awesome. It's so cool. Um, I'm gonna do a couple Tool questions if that's okay now.
That's fine.
Tools is a awesome band that I was very lucky to go see in January, I think. So I'm gonna do some Tool questions.
Sure. They're some of the
With
greatest musicians I've ever worked with. So I'm happy to speak about them.
Yeah, Miss Monica is their agent, and I've been pestering her for the past ever since I started actually. So for the past 4 months, trying to get an interview, and it's not happening anytime soon. But I'm fingers crossed, Mr. Carey will do something with me at the end of the year.
Well,
We'll
good
see.
luck.
Yeah, no, it's
They're
hard.
notoriously difficult to speak with. So
But it's interesting. They've been opening up so much. Like I've seen so many interviews with Mr. James Keenan. It's so weird. I've never seen that before, and I just got into them. And now it seems every other week you're getting an interview with them, which is it's so great that your top musicians are so open. But so with Anima, did Tool come into the studio already having the concept mapped out and the songs mapped out, or was it something where they kind of experimented and discovered during recording and tracking?
just to correct you, sorry, but the name of the album, as was told to me by Maynard, was Anima.
Anima. Okay, I see.
Anima.
Yeah, I
So
always
I
get it
know it's
wrong.
hard. It's hard, but I just so that you can get it correct as
So
far as
Maynard doesn't
I
kill
was
me.
told. So yes. Um, when I met with them, I went over to their rehearsal place, and they basically had played their and had been writing in that space for quite a long time. So by the time I got involved, the record was fairly well mapped out. We did a little bit of arrangement work and a little bit of minor changes here and there, but they had the concept and the um, uh, sort of musical structures pretty much worked out by the time I got there.
When you got there and you guys started actually recording, were there any extra tracks that maybe got put on to Lateralis, or was it all, like you said, all there?
There might have been ideas at the time that didn't get fully fleshed out until Lateralis, but most of the tracks that they played to me uh, were included in the Anima record.
Very cool. Now I'm gonna do a recording question and then I'll get back to Tool. So
Okay.
I found out very recently about mid-side recording, mid
Mhm.
super interesting concept. And so Anima and Salival have this super unique sound, and it probably is due to mid-side recording techniques. Where did you learn to do it so efficiently?
To be honest, I don't know that I used Midside on that particular project. It's a long time ago, so I don't quite remember.
Mhm.
But I learned that technique actually back in England when I was working at Real World Studios, and I was taught it by an engineer that I worked with there. Um, Fantastic technique for getting a unique stereo image using the figure eight on a microphone and a cardioid on the other one, and you flipping the phase on one side of the figure eight. So it's a really interesting and fascinating way to get stereo imagery out of something that might not necessarily have a wide stereo image. I remember using it on a record called Beat the Border by an artist called Jeffrey Oryema. And
Mhm.
he was a wonderful singer, very, very quiet voice, and he played very, very gently with finger picking on his acoustic guitar. And so we used a mid-side on his guitar and then a cardioid, fairly directional microphone on his voice to capture what we did. But we were able to get a big sort of stereo image
Yeah.
sound out of what was essentially one person and his guitar.
There's no words to even describe it. The microphones and the whole process is so intricate and interesting, and I've been enlightened fairly recently to the process,
Mhm.
and it's insane for any viewers that haven't dived or delved into microphones and the recording processes. You have to. There's a whole world to be discovered, like
Well,
Mr. David would
you
say.
need for the figure eight, you generally need either like a large diaphragm condenser microphone to have it
Mhm.
sort of vertically like that, so you can get the figure of eight pattern on both sides. A cardioid in the front, you split the figure of eight one into two different sides,
Stereo, yeah,
flip the phase on one of it so that it's sort of in phase and out of phase. Yeah, it's a fun technique. There's lots of fun
fascinating.
techniques in recording.
What's your favorite technique in recording?
I'm so as an engineer, I'd say I'm pretty average. So my recording techniques are more um, involved with trying to get the best performances out of musicians. I
Mhm.
wouldn't say I'm a really great engineer. I'm competent, but I think my skills are more aligned with being able to inspire musicians to play better. I'm able to capture things. I learned a lot when I was working at Real World and capturing instruments that I'd never seen before. But I think I think to be, truth be told, I'm a competent engineer, but I'm a reasonably good producer, I think.
You can't even like say that. That's those are like the unforgivable words. So coming from you, it's like that's like me saying like I'm Maynard James Keenan and my singing's kind of like mid. It's kind of average. I'm okay at singing, but
Well, I think that, look, I think, in retrospect of my career, I've made some great sounding records, and I think
you definitely have.
I've mixed things very well. That those are skills that I have. I've learned to record things. I've learned to be able to find the right way to get the best sound out of an instrument that's coming at me. But really, the best thing you can do is get a great performance from the artist, because then the sound of it becomes kind of secondary. It's like it sounds great, but it sounds great because the musician is playing really well.
Mhm. So would you liken yourself to almost like a Rick Rubin mentor kind of person?
I don't think Rick Rubin and I have the same techniques in working with bands. He's very, very, from the little I know of him, he's more of a big picture, conceptual um, technique of looking at the whole thing and um, talking more in the sort of esoteric and platitudes about music.
Mhm.
Um, I do that a little bit, but I like to get in the trenches with the band and really kind of dig into song structure and chordal movement, um, and really kind of develop things from the ground up, even to the point of keys of the songs and how the vocalists will use their voice in different keys and different ways. So I kind of dig in, and I get my hands dirty in that. And I think Rick Rubin, as wonderful and fantastic a producer he is, he uses different techniques to get things out of musicians than I do.
Awesome. That's I run out of words to say usually around this point in the interview, but there's nothing more I can say. I love music theory. Uh, Me and my friends nerd out about it all the time, but it's cool hearing it from the almost the opposite perspective, the musician, the producer. And I aspire to be at some point actually competent in music theory because right now even still it just like boggles my mind to think
Mhm.
about keys and chord structures and chord names get are lost on me. But one day,
One day. Keep working at it. I mean, my music theory is rudimentary at best, really. But I've just been doing it for so long. I know the changes. I know the things that work together, easily. But I'm learning too every day. With the Delanilla project that I'm working on, we're working on different chordal structures on songs that is new to me as well. So, I'm 62 years old and I'm still learning how to do this. So don't
very
don't don't
encouraging.
sell yourself short. You had a long time to go.
Yeah, only at 14, so I got plenty of time. I'm
You
gonna
got
go
plenty
back
of time.
to Tool, okay? If
Okay.
you don't mind.
Sure.
So, what was it like working with Mr. Justin on Anima versus Lateralis? So when he was kind of newer to the band versus when he was more acquainted.
Well, I'm sure, as you would know, he was a replacement for Paul, who had played in the band before. Um, and essentially, he was, helping to interpret the songs that they had already started writing, and contributed in a playing way. But on Lateralis, he really took the lead on a couple of songs compositionally and really drove them forwards, like Schism, for example. His bass line in that was something that I think he came up with, and it was his initiative on that song that was the inspiration for that. So he just grew as an artist, as a musician between the two records, and it was great to see.
Do you think you grew as a producer between those two records and maybe were more in the same sense acquainted to the band?
I think that the best thing about that was that we had already been working together. And so we didn't have to open lines of communication. We already had that familiarity. So
Mhm.
we were able to dive into Lateralis fairly simply. Whereas on Anima, we had to open those lines of communication. We had to get to know each other and see how each other worked. And by the time Lateralis came along, it was much more comfortable.
So cool. I'm running out of things. It's so cool. So what would be your white whale project? I'm not trying to reference Mastodon in that, but in the same, I kind of am. So pun sort of intended. But what is your like dead or alive? You could resurrect an artist. I was thinking Zappa, honestly, or Queens of the Stone Age. I would love to hear an album with
It
you.
would be Queens of the Stone Age would be something really fun to do, I think. But they have a good system of way of working, and I don't like to intrude on systems. There are people like Trent Reznor that I'd love to work with at some point, but if I could resurrect anybody, I think David Bowie would probably be somebody that I would have really appreciated working with.
What are your thoughts on Black Star? Because I think that that whole project is heart shattering, really.
Absolutely, I would agree. Yeah, it's heartbreaking. I mean, he knew he was dying, and so it was fabulous. Um,
It's
I,
awesome
okay.
for any of the audience who hasn't listened to that album. It's awesome. Genre blending, weird, funky. Love it. It's awesome.
But a great capstone to his work, I think.
Yeah, and there's a trend quite popular where artists you could sometimes tell sometimes it's more mainstream, but where quality in projects will slowly decline, and by the end, fans won't be as psyched for a new album. But with David Bowie, I mean, I honestly think that that last project is one of his best.
I would agree. I think that it's really down to the artist and their intention and their um, willingness to keep exploring new things that helps them grow. Sometimes you reach patches where artists will try things and they're not as successful at it, or they didn't realize what they wanted, or they were going down a road that wasn't as um, fruitful for them
Mhm.
creatively. But the great artists always come back with things that are fantastic near the ends of their careers, I think. So um, Bowie obviously is the clear example that we're using now, but there are other artists that also have done fantastic work later in their careers. Tom Waits
He's
is
awesome.
one. Um,
Oh, I got a Swans record somewhere out there, somewhere. But yeah, I completely agree. Which then moving on to the next question would be, which one of the artists that you've worked with have been most open-minded and creatively free?
um, that's a very interesting question. Uh,
That's a score for me.
I remember Muse was quite open-minded and was trying a lot of different things at the in the Origin of Symmetry record that we were working on.
Mhm,
Um, uh, Mastodon were as well. They were pretty. I mean, we had a great time making that record because they make records that are very emotionally um, deep, I think. I mean, the last one was the subject matter was a lot about an old friend and manager who they'd been with for years and years and were very close with, who passed away.
mhm.
Crack the Sky obviously was about, partially at least about Braun's sister,
Yeah.
who passed away when they were young. So there were, but they were, when we got into the process of making the record, they were open to listening to lots of ideas from me. So they were quite, open-minded in the work that we're doing. Crown Lands, the one that I'm working with right now, they were very open-minded. We're writing a whole bunch of new material, so that's fun. I mean, I'm always sort of more focused on the current projects than I am on past projects. I kind of
Mhm.
finish the record and then move on to other things and trying to go back and think about older work that I've done. I mean, Tool were open-minded too. They were great. They were great to work with. King Crimson obviously were very open-minded. They were very improvisational. So there were very little rules when it came to those records.
Yeah, I can attest to Mastodon because I've been doing some guerrilla marketing, if you will, and trying to get more artists on the podcast. And I'm now in direct contact with Braun and with their managers. And so
Mhm.
I will be meeting with him because I live in a city. So him and Mr. Bill we'll meet up sometime for an interview, hopefully this summer, right before their
Great.
tour,
So
which is
you're in Atlanta.
awesome. Yes, sir. Well,
Okay.
I'm right outside of Atlanta. I am like 20 minutes away, but
Okay.
yeah, right next to
Up in
Jarbo.
Buckhead, you mean, or
Uh, Not exactly Buckhead, so it's probably like 30 minutes in. I'm
okay.
near Roswell,
Okay.
mhm,
Great.
which is right next to Jarbo. So
Okay.
Atlanta is super weird, almost in the same sense as Toronto, where like the rap industry is kind of really booming, but then uh, directly underneath is incredible layers and layers of deep musical heritage for
Mhm,
us as blues, you know. But
for sure.
it's so cool with like I guess Mastodon REM, just such incredible bands from Atlanta that make me super proud to be here,
Mhm.
to be around. It's super cool. So I'm gonna move on to a kind of unrelated, kind of weird question, but I thought it'd be fun to ask, which is Mr. Steve Albini passed away a couple weeks ago, which is pretty tragic. Did you have any connection to him? Have you worked with him before?
I'd never worked with him. I met him once when I was looking to maybe use his studio in Chicago. It didn't happen. Um,
Mhm,
we had a brief conversation. I can't say that I knew him very well. I respected his work quite a lot and his ethics and his yeah, his value system were inspiring. I didn't know him. Saddened because, he was a great producer and a great person who died young.
for sure. And then I guess that'd bring me to the next topic, which would be, what do you want your legacy to be?
I think that I would just like my legacy to have helped young musicians to grow into better artists, I think. Um, as far as a public legacy of a body of work, I think that I've done um, enough in that area to um, be successful in a way that it would be recognized by other people, but I get more pleasure and more satisfaction when I've made a record with a band and they turn to me and say, we're better musicians because of working with you. That's extremely satisfying. It's great when I talk to people. I did a record with Peter Gabriel years ago that was a soundtrack to a film, and a lot of people reached out to me and said, that this record had really touched them and it really, meant something special to them, or had, they'd listened to it in a time of difficulty for them, and that it was a positive effect on their lives. And that's fantastic. I mean, that's also extremely rewarding. So being able to touch people with the music that you help make and to also help the musicians that you're working with become better artists, that's the legacy that I would like to have.
And like you've said, you're already like halfway there with the incredible library and back catalog of everyone and anyone. And Peter Gabriel, that's one that is almost I didn't see it coming. And yeah, he was like one of the first major artists that you worked with, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Um, I don't know. I kind of didn't see that like when I was diving into your catalog. It's weird because you have like Stone Sour, you have Tool, you have Peter Gabriel, King Crimson, Muse, which all are they fall under the umbrella of rock, of course, but I wouldn't liken King Crimson to Peter Gabriel or really any of them at all. So how do any of these, I guess, come to life? Is it you reaching out to the bands? Is it fate? Is it their managers? How does that work?
No, it was really kind of very organic. I started in a studio in Hamilton
Mhm.
with a producer called Daniel Lenoir, who at the time was working a lot with Brian Eno, and
Like the
they
Eno
ended up
record.
and they ended up yeah, going to um, at the from the studio that we were working in Hamilton. Dan and Brian were doing a lot of the ambient music series that Brian was working on.
Oh yeah.
They then went over to England, or to Ireland actually, to work on the Unforgettable Fire. They came back, and Dan ended up going over to work with Peter Gabriel on a film soundtrack, which led into the So album. He needed some help, so he called me, and I went over and joined that project. And then just ended up staying with Peter. So I worked with Peter for about 9 years, and I built up a catalog of techniques of recording music and working on music that was um, worldy, but also, sort of progressive rock style, but with, world influences that led to other artists wanting to work with me because they wanted that sort of character to their music. Tool called me after I worked with King Crimson because they liked the world music that I had done, and they liked the King Crimson stuff that I had done and the David Sylvian stuff that I had done. And then metal bands started picking up on Tool's music and said, "Oh, well, let's get this guy." So it was all very organic, and I'm quite proud of the fact that my catalog incorporates a lot of different styles of music within the umbrella of rock or rock pop music. But I'm happy that it's not just in one specific narrow genre of music. It's in a number. So I always worked towards that because I found that music wasn't necessarily like I didn't like music because it was of a certain genre. I like music because it was done with great intention and with deep passion.
Yeah, the that's what I love about your catalog, especially because your website is one of the few that is not blocked on my school computer. And my phone is completely messed up because I don't have headphone jacks, so I can't use my phone. And your website has all the music on there for free. So I've listened to the selected songs you have probably about 50 to 100 times in the past 6 months. Like every
Okay.
morning you wake up, I put on Schism and it goes all the way down, Stone Sour, everything. It's I don't know. And yeah,
Well,
going
I'll
back
have
to
to
the
update it for you then.
yeah, you add more, please. That's what's so cool with working with such an incredible I guess artist you could call yourself. All the music, but the world music too. That's something that really stood out about your catalog.
The Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, for
Yeah,
example.
you
Yeah,
don't see that with other producers.
yeah.
It's like,
Those
is there?
records I'm really proud of, those ones. I think he was quite an extraordinary individual, Nusrat.
How did you get like into that? Was it because King Crimson and Mr.
No,
Peter
no, that was
Gabriel?
that was through World Music. That was through Real World Studios or Real World Records.
Uh,
And Michael Brook, who is an old friend of mine from Canada, in fact, and he was there and he was booked to do that record, and I was engineering for him there and working on that project. So worked on a few records with Nusrat. It was really, really special.
and have you been looking out at some new world um music artists? And are there any that you would like to maybe work with?
I would I mean, I have to sort of hear things from bands that come to me. I'm quite busy with other things, but
Uh,
uh, there's all kinds of great new music that's coming on. Real World is doing amazing things with some bands that are coming out. So maybe I'll do another project back at Real World at some point.
that would be awesome. That'd be excellent. It's been very interesting the past 6 months, first like on my side on social media, because I've been seeing the real rise of especially African rock bands and African
Mhm.
psychedelic bands and such, like Badu Mokhtar. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but
I don't know.
they just had a they just had a new album out on Matador Records, and it's so weird and jangly and experimental, and it's mainstream now, or as mainstream as underground can be, but it's mainstream to the point where they're getting real numbers in streaming, and
Oh, it's great.
that's incredible. So how do you think streaming has affected your side of making the music?
Streaming. It's there. It's allowed for more artists to enter the fray, I
Mm,
think, but it's like all new technologies. The first people that are left behind generally are the artists, unfortunately, in compensation terms. So, every time a new technology comes along, whether it's, vinyl records to CDs to downloads to streaming, the artist's share of the product that they make goes down. And so that's the downside. I'm not pointing any fingers at any one particular organization. I think there's a number in the pathway that take their share before the artist gets theirs. Um, there's opportunities with certain other, less uh, commercialized companies where artists can reach their fan base, um,
mm,
and that's a wonderful thing. But it takes a band now has to be much more switched on to their own uh, promotion and their own development than in the past because just aren't the budgets anymore for an artist uh, to rest on or utilize to promote. They have to get in and do the hard work themselves. Um, it's it makes for, very savvy business people as musicians in the music industry now, which is maybe a good thing.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, the development is what's more in the hands of the artists and their closer representatives.
Yeah, that is a very good point that you bring up because going back to social media, right? Um, my Instagram is only bands. And so whenever I'm looking through my Instagram, you see so much of it's the same template, which is interesting. Same template, but a bunch of really small artists would use the same template to promote themselves,
Mhm.
which in a sense is good, right? Because then more artists, smaller artists are getting out there. But from the negatives, if everyone's doing the same promotional material, it kind of makes you non-unique, and then people get sick of it.
Mhm.
And then I guess the question is, how do you make your promotional material not cringeworthy and not like, oh, they're really doing that? But you are right. The artists are becoming much more creative, which is an
They're
interesting
becoming
pathway
they're
to see.
becoming more creative, but the other side effect, unfortunately, is the devaluation of the music itself.
Yes.
Artists are no longer, compensated for the actual work that they create that touches people, but people happily buy a T-shirt or, tickets to a show, which is great, but merchandising is the way that bands are able to, you know, get their spending money now, as
Yeah,
opposed to
yeah.
selling the actual product that they create.
It's more the byproduct of the main product rather than the heart-wrenching music itself. Now, I'm gonna do one more tool question and then we'll do a big question if that's okay.
Okay.
Cool. With the song Third Eye, how many times did it take for Mr. James Keenan to get that crazy yell?
Oh,
Or I guess multiple
I think
yells.
he did it in his first take.
First take?
Yeah, I think so. That and The Grudge, I think that those were like first take screams.
And those are like some of the best screams.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
no, he's
crazy.
really talented at that. It doesn't take him long to do that. He's got a real he knows the technique of how to do that properly. And yeah, he's pretty extraordinary.
Does that happen often with your artists that they get the thing
Depends.
instantly?
Depends. When I worked with Chad and Mudvayne,
Mm.
uh, we worked a lot harder on different vocal takes that he did. So I made him sing quite a lot. So I don't think he was very happy about that, but
You're like punishing him.
I have a certain thing in my mind of what I think that somebody can accomplish, and so I will push somebody to that. But Maynard, you'd never need to push. He's got an amazing work ethic. He's extremely prepared for, the work that he's doing, and he delivers pretty quickly. Not that Chad wasn't, Chad was very prepared and strong, but it was just I had a different thing in mind for him.
Yeah, I'm hoping to have Mr. Chad on the podcast anyways. So no bad blood, no bad blood.
No, no, Chad was great.
Yeah,
Chad was great. I worked him very hard, but he delivered. So, you know,
as long as they deliver, and it makes the whole product as a whole much better, I think.
yeah.
I'm gonna do a very loaded question, and we'll see how this goes. Okay.
Okay.
Uh, you have to give me three categories, right? So maybe three songs, three uh artists, three books, three authors that you enjoy. Magic numbers three that could change someone's life. This is very confusing. I do apologize. You could do like three authors, change the category, three authors, or you could do an author, a favorite album, and then your favorite recording studio. It's whatever you want.
That's just three things that are
Exactly.
of mine. Okay. Well, I think one of my favorite books of all time is 100 Years of Solitude. Um,
Cool. Write that down.
Gabriel Garcia Marquez. It's a magic realism book that was from uh, 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 many, many years ago, but a fantastic, fantastic read.
Mhm.
Um, as far as studios go, I mean, I would have to say Real World Studios. It's really where I cut my teeth and was such an important place and group of people in my life that it was extremely profound for me. I don't know if it would be profound for another person, but for me, it was something extraordinary. And I guess, one of the most wonderful songs ever written is God Only Knows by the Beach Boys.
I
That's
knew it. I knew
a,
you were going to
a,
say that.
a beautiful piece of music that makes me weep every time I hear it. So,
Exactly the same for me. I discovered it on the BBC because they were doing some anniversary thing and they had a bunch of pop singers um, cover it. And it's a
mhm.
whole video and it's all intricate and everything. And I
Mhm.
discovered the actual song through that. And it's a beautiful, beautiful
Yeah,
song.
gorgeous piece of music.
So that's kind of it. I really appreciate you for letting me do this, for um, extending yourself into this kind of weird realm of teenagers interviewing you. I really appreciate it. It's been a blast.
Been a lot of fun for me too. Thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, thank you. I hope someday I'll be in Ontario. I have no plans to go anytime soon, and I'm in school, but maybe one day I'll see you in
Well,
person, okay?
if you do, reach out and we'll get together.
I certainly will. Have a wonderful day, a wonderful night, a wonderful morning, whatever time it is.
Thanks. You too.